All right, it is now time to go to my pick as we also go back to 2005 in February as Mr. Brando here selected Capcom to do his last pick that was State of Emergency. The one I have is a Capcom game that it's weird. It's a game where you forgot they did it because they normally don't really do other they don't do a lot of historical games, or at least set in historical times. It's mostly really nowadays set in more of a fantasy world. Either it has to do with monsters or dinosaurs. Nothing too historical. Not even like samurais. I think Monster Hunter is their answer for samurai games per se, because you can be a samurai in that game. But this is Shadow of Rome. Shadow of Rome is a game, I think, by the time you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, that was a thing. Because it's a game set in Rome, and I would argue it's easily inspired by the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, easily, And I bought this game out of a whim because, one, Capcom was hot at the time. He could do no wrong. I picked it up because I was like, oh, dude, Coliseum fights? No one's doing Coliseum fights. That's awesome. And like based on the trailer and what they showed, it was awesome of you're throwing all these weapons, and it's super archaic for what they did. It went as far as bloodiness of like cutting off limbs and arms. You're fighting to win. Meanwhile, you're also playing another game inside that game where it's kind of like a sneaking game where we have one character that's stuck in the Coliseum because basically I guess if I remember correctly, he was framed for something, and he ends up having to be the gladiator to survive. Meanwhile, his friend is going kind of espionage, sneaking around, trying to find a way to, show evidence that he is not the culprit that did, the thing that he did. Which I don't know. It was like kind of like the death of Caesar or something like. I'm blurry. Please leave a comment down below if you remember any of that. But basically, it's basically two games. And honestly, to tell you the truth, like as much I get the sneaking part just pushes me to like I want to go back and slice and dice people, but I get it. I get it for what that was. But nowadays I think that we could get this back so much, sadly enough. And it's funny you brought this up of Capcom and Dead Rising, because there was a sequel to this game and it got canceled, and all those ideas that they were going with Shadow of Rome 2 ended up being Dead Rising. Isn't
that was what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm so sorry I took that away from you.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's really cool because I had no idea about that.
Mm-hmm.
No idea about that when I selected Capcom for the Dead Rising ideas to incorporate into State of Emergency. I just thought it was really neat that they were really melded and talking points with each other. This game, Shadow of Rome, I never played it. But it's really the thing for me that's really difficult in visualizing how I would want to do a game like this today is because just about 8 years ago, we had a game called Rise, Son of Rome. And it was really good. A bit, it was an Xbox exclusive, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure if it still is. It might still be. But I remember when I bought my Xbox One a year after it launched, and on Black Friday I picked up really cheap Rise Son of Rome because it was one of the exclusives for it. I'm like, all right, I'll check it out, whatever. And it looked really cool. The combat was really fun. From a gameplay perspective, the sneaking aspect of it, same with you, I didn't really we're not making a Gladiator Metal Gear. Like, that's not what
right.
I don't think if I were to remake or do a new Shadow of Rome, I wouldn't focus on that. Instead, like what I would try to focus on are kind of big epic battles in the Colosseum, and really utilize that more. Like, you can have other areas but the Colosseum is probably going to be a big battle set for both big epic battles, as well as some of the chariot races they would do. Try to incorporate some cool stuff with that, some action sequences. And so from the get-go, I kind of gave you a hint before we started that gameplay-wise, I was struggling to think what I would do with it, other than make it a more action oriented than even the original. I was more about finding a company that has done action games. That I thought of them, and then I realized after looking into them, they don't do action games anymore. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should pick somebody else. But you know what? No, I'm actually going to stick with it because I know they can do good action games, and they've kind of gone off to do something different. So if you don't mind, I'm going to say my developer first. Okay. Ready at Dawn.
Okay.
So they are now under the Oculus brand doing VR stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a VR guy. So I think that's a big shame. I think that this team was more, they had more to offer. And unfortunately, one of the last big things that they did for console was the Order 1886, which kind of got some lukewarm reviews at best. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was bad. I just think people it didn't live up. The trailers and all the stuff you saw of it didn't live up to what people thought it was going to be. In that, like, the gameplay was solid, the story was there, but it almost felt like it was a preamble to what was to come, versus an actual full-blown story epic.
So you were saying you think that there was follow-ups to this title and it just didn't pan out?
I think, I mean, whether or not that's what they intended, I don't know. Okay. But that's the way it feels like to me. It kind of feels like we're just like, they didn't release what they wanted it to be, and that they were hoping probably that, hey, we'll release this and then the next one that all sequels got canceled. But the games I did play that they did make were the God of War PSP games, the Chains of Olympus, Ghosts of Sparta, and they're God of War games. But I was like, they can do action. We've seen that they can do it. So I want to pull them away from Oculus and get them to make it some real cool action games and give them another chance, because I feel like that they are talented enough to do it. But the problem is the only real success they had was replicating something that another studio had already done. I love Obsidian as a developer. I think they make some great stuff. But some of their biggest titles are using engines made by other great companies. Mm-hmm. They think about the Bethesda, think about BioWare, the games, KOTOR 2, New Vegas, some of these great, awesome games made by Obsidian, but I kind of feel like, man, Ready at Dawn could have been that. They could have been Sony's Obsidian if they would have had some more backing. Mm-hmm. And they could have grown into something cool. Instead, now they're making an Oculus game. So I'm looking forward to hear what you got to say, because I feel like you might have some more interesting ideas gameplay-wise. Mm-hmm. I struggled with it. I struggled with it for months because it took so long to do this episode. Trying to figure out some cool stuff. I think that there would be some really cool multiplayer ideas to do Coliseum stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's definitely what anybody will probably think the first thing in their head. Like, if you're going to do a game with Coliseum, multiplayer is probably the first thing people are going to think of, because people want to compete and probably compete against each other. It's almost like the Battle Royale, but not Battle Royale, right? Because it's not like 1,000 people. It's just like a select of people going in and slicing each other. Or you're doing some, like you said, competitions, like either like chariot race, or you're dealing with either tigers attacking you while you're fighting, or maybe you'd be setting up. Because some of the stuff that they did in the Shadow Colossus, they would have these obstacle courses while you're also fighting too. Like, they'll have like platforms, so you can climb the platforms and fight up on the platforms and all that stuff. That can still be there. But the problem, I think, is you're probably having this is, what else can you do with Coliseum? Because, like, eventually you're going to probably get bored. Yeah. Just slicing and dicing. And there's nothing else to do with that. So my answer to that is, that I wrote at the time is, I would say the player is a slave in Roman times, fighting in the Coliseum and battles while reflecting his past that got him there. So you have two different actions. So you would, instead of the side quest of this guy trying to, free him from showing he's guilty of something. How about like we get a backstory of how it led to that, and then we get awesome different action sequence. Just think about like Ben-Hur, right? The movie Ben-Hur, of like this story leading him to this Coliseum and how it happens, and we can get some cool like these awesome set pieces. So like you have your Coliseum that's going to be your normal gameplay where they get to throw some curveballs at you. You know, you got to either you fight animals or they have out of course, but then these backstories can be great set pieces that can give you kind of different gameplay. That's still action, but just different thing. They could be fightings that involve with horses. They can be battles that take place in like in a secluded place, one-on-one battles. Like there's awesome set pieces they can do in the flashback while you still got your normal fight to the death Coliseum to go back and forth. And that way you get some character development of, okay, how did I become this mega star that I am, leading to this thing, which I don't care if it ends up leading to his freedom or leading to his death. It doesn't matter to me. As long as we get this build-up of this character going into this. So much, I even love the twist of some of these characters you meet in the flashback, you meet them in the Coliseum, and you guys are fighting to the death to really sink that love, right? Like, hey, this was a battle buddy. He got captured. Now you got to fight to the death with him, and you got to beat him. Even though, like, you might have had a flashback moment of him, he might have saved your life. Like, let's get that knee-jerk connection where not only you're fighting random people on this Coliseum, but throw some curveballs at us of fighting. Like, hey, you're going to be fighting people that you didn't think you were going to fight in this game that were in your flashback that you connected with during these giant set pieces and everything like that. Or, you know, they could be threats of like if you're fighting somebody and if you don't kill them, you know, they'll kill your wife or kids or something like that. I don't know. Like, but it needs to be something set up for that. And I think one of the most important things people are going to ask is, what's the weapon lineup going to be, right? They're going to have to be a lot of different weapons lineups for you not to get bored off of, or, you know, either choosing your layout, or better yet, I wouldn't even have to choose a layout. I'd be more of like just random whatever weapons get thrown up there just at you, and you deal with the consequence of what weapons that you get on there. I think that's the way the true gladiator style would be, especially when you're fighting against people with chariots, you know, or just stuff like that. I think that this game don't have to be too long. I mean, you're looking like maybe 25 hours, 30. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be super long. It needs a tighter fit. Would make this game very classic for its own way. And maybe you don't have to really. Maybe Shadow Realm can still have that title because, you know, they could be the Shadow could represent the flashback. You know, who is this mysterious person that we don't know about that became this famous person. So the studios I pick for that though is it's going to be Capcom's rival. I pick for this one. We're going to go with Tecmo. I'm going to go with especially Omega Force, because Omega Force is now the rival for them, especially from the Monster Hunter series, as they have their own little Monster Heroes thing. But now, if you haven't seen the new trailer for EA doing a collaboration with them, Wild Heart, how they are taking down these monsters and everything like that, I think that they are definitely developed better for these games. And I can picture the gameplay of Monster Hunter, or hell, even Neo or whatever, in this Coliseum game, of how that gameplay would be, yeah. So that's my vision of what Capcom can do with this Shadow Realm. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's really neat, and I agree with you with the length. You don't have to be too long. I also think that it would be really neat to potentially explore and like do some fun stuff with alternate history, where, you know, instead of Caesar being this hero that was struck down, maybe he's actually like a tyrant, and people finding out that he's a tyrant might actually be pretty bad. So he's a tyrant behind closed doors. So it's this whole thing where maybe your character is the one who kills Caesar, but it's all masked up. It's all like behind closed doors. It's like, we can't let this get out that he was like this, because people will be so distraught that it would bring down, you know, the entire empire, because it's all built on a lie. I think that'd be kind of neat. I
think one of the challenges when I wrote in my notes, I don't know if it would work, I'll have to get your opinion on this, is the choices that you do in your flashbacks would affect how the Coliseum will work out. So say, you know, if you spared an enemy in one of your flashbacks, you know, how does it affect you in the Coliseum. Would you see him in the Coliseum? You know, would you not? You know, would it change the outcome? Because it can't be just one Coliseum. I want him, just like Shadow Realm, I believe that you move to different areas. So you start out small, then you get to the bigger and bigger and bigger one until you hit Rome or something like that. You know, kind of like almost the map of Gladiator. Because I think there's no way you could do this game without being influenced by Gladiator, in my opinion. Of, you know, looking for basically inspiration for how you want to do this story. So, but who knows? I mean, if they decide to put the money in that and bring it back in a different way, I think the outside help would be the best choice for them. Maybe Tecmo or whoever they want to choose, because I don't think they care about like doing it in-house, especially at the time. Some of those producers, like Ono is gone, Inafune's been gone, so like those people are not part of that project anymore. And I think that game is lost in that package of Inafune and Ono, that they'll never gonna come back. You know, along with Asura's Wrath and all these other one-hit titles and whatnot. So,